What is going on, everybody? I hope you're enjoying your Hump Day Wednesday. This is NYG Jeffy T 3285, and I'm just here to go over some quick newsworthy and notes going on around New York Giants training camp as they go into the second week, as they continue in the second week of their NFL training camp, and we're about a week away from the New York Giants' first preseason game against the New England Patriots on August 11th. Now, some of the news and notes that have been coming out of New York Giants training camp, one of the positives so far with the Giants has been injuries, as there haven't been a whole lot of injuries so far with the Giants that have piled up on this team. You have some guys that have been nicked and bruised as of late, as somebody like Ricky Seals-Jones, who's been out recently due to an unspecified reason, has missed a good chunk of training camp so far this year, and it's given opportunities for some of the young guys like Jeremiah Hall, Austin Allen, Daniel Bellinger, and Jordan Akins their chance to show what they can do at the tight end position for the Giants going forward. So we have to wonder what exactly is going on with Ricky Seals-Jones and if he's going to be returning anytime soon. As well as John Feliciano, the projected New York Giants center for the offensive line, missed the past few days when he was dealing with heat exhaustion. He did return to practice for at least the first half session of the practice, but then he ended up leaving towards the second half, and the New York Giants continue to shuffle in some guys at the center position. They've tried out guys like Jameel Douglas, Ben Bredesen, and then, of course, Shane Lemieux, who has been playing the majority of time at center while John Feliciano has been out, and they've shifted rookie left guard from UNC, Josh Azudu, to play over there next to Andrew Thomas, and, of course, Lemieux at the left guard position. So there's still been some shuffling around the offensive line. Then you have a couple of guys that got banged up yesterday, which including is Antonio Williams, who came away with a knee injury yesterday. Pretty much he's just a guy that's going to be day-to-day for now. Could be week-to-week, depending on how severe the knee injury really is. And then Robert Foster, while trying to make a sideline catch, he ended up getting carted off the field. Still don't know the complete results on what's going on with him, as these are a couple of guys, Antonio Williams and Robert Foster, that were trying to make the roster as depth position players for their respective positions going forward. So you have to see clarity when it goes on that. But so far, besides the guys that have been on the PUP list, and we all know who those guys are right now, the New York Giants have pretty much come away so far pretty stout and pretty healthy in the beginning of training camp, but there's still plenty of time to go on. So hopefully these guys can remain healthy going forward in training camp. Now, some of the other news and notes that have been going on. Everything that you're hearing right now for the Giants is that Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence are really making their presence known on that defensive line. Have been quote-unquote unguardable. Leonard Williams has been pretty much unblockable when it comes to so far in camp, where team players have not been able to guard him one-on-one. He's just been having a bunch of plays in the backfield and been wreaking havoc on the Giants' offensive line. Albeit, take it with a grain of salt, practice right now, have only been practicing in pads for a couple of days. So you could take it with a grain of salt if you choose to, but still it's a very strong sign when you hear that. And even as well, Dexter Lawrence has looked very dominant when it comes to practice reps so far for the New York Giants in training camp. So you love hearing something like that both Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence are making their presence known so far with that New York Giants defense, as well as Kayvon Thibodeau seems to be having a really strong first step off the rush on the outside. So you love hearing stuff like that. Quincy Roche seems to be bouncing back after he was a little bit of a non-factor, was pretty quiet, but he seems to be making some plays now in training camp, and he seems to be a guy that's slowly rising up the depth chart, which you love to hear. And even a guy that like O'Shane Ximines, where I'll give credit where credit is due. I have not been a guy that has been completely on the O'Shane Ximines bandwagon, but he's been going out there, and maybe he's finally starting to put it together as a pass rusher. That maybe it takes some time, some guys, especially on the defensive and the offensive line, to really learn the NFL game and to be put in that right scheme until they eventually develop into the type of player that you think they're going to be when they get into the NFL. So maybe O'Shane Ximines, going into a contract year this year, maybe that Wink Martindale system is getting the most out of his talents as him being that outside stand-up linebacker for the outside and be able to be just a situational pass rusher. Maybe he's finally starting to put his talents together, and he could be a guy that if we can get anything from O'Shane Ximines, if he's on this roster going forward, as terms of a depth defensive outside linebacker, you'll take it for what he could bring to the table, as well as guys like Ellerson Smith and Quincy Roche at that outside linebacker position. So I really like what I'm hearing in terms of the defensive line and outside linebacking position so far. Now, in terms of the offensive line, I mean, you're hearing a bunch of mixed bags. Andrew Thomas right now looks dominant on that left side of the offensive line, which is what you love to hear. And everybody has been reaping the praise so far of a guy like Andrew Thomas, who he's just come in, he's been saying the right things, he's coming off as a leader, and his play is showing it right now as he's been standing up stout. His hand placement has been great. His footwork has been great. He's been standing up and playing stalwart left tackle right now against O'Shane Ximines, against Kayvon Thibodeau, against Quincy Roche, Ellerson Smith, whoever it is. Andrew Thomas has been answering the bell. Unfortunately, you can't completely say the same about Evan Neal on the right side. He's been struggling a little bit, especially when it comes to speed rushers on the outside. He seems to be doing well when it comes to guys trying to run in from the inside, but he's been struggling a little bit in terms of the outside rush. But that's going to happen when you have a guy coming in his first few days in training camp where he's going to struggle a little bit. Andrew Thomas struggled a lot in his first year, and it took him maybe about 5, 6, 7 games until he finally started to get the NFL game concept. And then he finally started to show the type of talents that we thought he could be as that left tackle going forward. So some people might be sounding the bells a little bit on Evan Neal going forward. But you have to understand, it's training camp. These guys are still learning the ropes, still trying to understand what Bobby Johnson wants to implement on that offensive line. And Evan Neal, we know the talent that this guy has. It might take him a little bit of time to adjust to the outside rush when it comes to pass rushers on the opposite side. So yeah, it might be a little bit concerning right now, but it's still the beginning of training camp. Give these guys the time to be able to adjust inside. The only thing that's really concerning to me, to be honest, I'm not even concerned as much about Evan Neal because I think eventually, as the season goes on, he might struggle at the beginning, but I think Evan Neal will be able to round things out and be a pretty good right tackle in this league going forward. The interior line worries me a little bit, and then mostly at that center position because John Feliciano has already been struggling when it comes to staying on the field. He's been dealing with heat exhaustion. I know you can't really get on a guy for that, but at the same time, you're rotating guys right now at that center position, and you're relying on a lot of guys that have never really consistently played center as their main position going forward. Nick Gates has been a guy who's still coming back from a major injury. You don't know what you're going to get from him. If you get anything, it's gold at this point. So you got to hope that he could come back and show something. But he's going to be pretty much a depth guy. Ben Bredesen, Shane Lemieux, these guys are, and even John Feliciano to a degree. These are guys that have mostly been offensive guards that are starting to learn and play a little bit more offensive center going forward. So you're having pretty much project guys playing that center position. And on the offensive line, the center is the ring general of that offensive line. They're the guys that pretty much get everybody in their position. They get everybody settled down. They're the coach of that offensive line. If that center position is struggling and you have guys rotating in and out, it might cause a ripple effect for the rest of that offensive line because if the center position is not where you need it to be, it might cause the rest of the offensive line to struggle in terms of, what you're going to get going forward. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I think Lewinsky is going to be a very good asset, especially when Evan Neal starts learning the NFL game going forward at the offensive line position. So I think Lewinsky is going to be good. And I like the fact that they're giving Josh Azudu some snaps at left guard because I think with his ability to pull on that offensive line and be able to use his strength to open up holes and in terms of the run game, that's I think what Josh Azudu's strength is going to be, and that's what Bobby Johnson is looking to in terms of the offensive line going forward. Shout out to some of my guys that have been saying that in the offensive line, like Big Pat Sports Talk, NYG22, Adam Costas, Hit Squad, G Nation, Classified 3F for Joel, Mac the Giants fan, Zion Zenith, all my guys from the Big Blue Crew. They've been shouting this out the entire time about that New York Giants offensive line in terms of what Bobby Johnson is looking for in terms of the type of run scheme he wants to run. And it looks like they're going to be more of a power running offensive line. And that's what I think a guy like Josh Azudu might excel in. So I love the fact he's getting more shots there. But it's just really when it comes to Evan Neal, take it with a grain of salt. Kid's still learning the offensive line as we go, still learning the NFL game. It might take him a little bit of time, but I think in the end he'll be a good player. But the center position is a little bit concerned because of the amount of rotation we're having so far, and you need that guy to be in there and consistently be that ring general on the center position going forward. Now, in terms of the offensive line, in terms of the skill positions, I have been one of the biggest proponents. I have been one of the biggest detractors against Kenny Golladay all off season. I said this guy, I don't think he fits the system. I don't think this guy is going to be the guy. And I have to be honest, Kenny Golladay, when he's motivated, he can be a guy that can be a difference maker. As in this practice today, Kenny Golladay made some nice passes, albeit Kadarius Toney was scaling it back a little bit today, and he's not only been the go-to guy in that offense. He wasn't the benefactor today. I think they really want to try to get Kenny Golladay some looks in this offense, and Kenny Golladay answered the bell. He was making those 50-50 catches. He was out muscling cornerbacks. He looked motivated, and that's what you love to see out of a guy that's pretty much playing for his New York Giants future outside of 2022, and a guy that they hope can have a major bounce-back season after they gave him that 4-year, $72 million contract last off season. You will expect Kenny Golladay to go up there and be that contested catch guy. So I'll give him his credit due that Kenny Golladay looked really good in practice today. But let's also remember, it's practice. So we have to see these guys be able to show out. Kadarius Toney, he's looked good at times in practice too. He's looked unguardable at times. So you have to give him this due. Daniel Jones has stepped up the past couple of days in practice. His passes have been a little bit sharper. He's looked better in terms of his poise in the pocket, but at the same time, there hasn't been any hitting. Nobody is the plays where there's a couple of plays where he has been sacked. Shout out to Adam Costas, who has been saying this the whole time. With the plays were not going all the way through. There's a couple of plays where Daniel Jones would have been sacked on some of those offensive sets that were running through the entire time. So Daniel Jones has made some nice crisp plays, and he has looked better in the past couple of days of practice, which is an encouraging sign. But we have to see what it's going to be like when live games come around, and when the lights are on, and when he's playing against the Tennessee Titans at 4:15 in Nashville on that day, and see how Daniel Jones is going to be answering the bell. And that goes for that offensive line too, because you're going to be going against guys like Bud Dupree, Harold Landry III, Jeffrey Simmons. You got Kevin Byard in the secondary. You got Caleb Farley coming back in the secondary for the Titans. And you're going against a very, very good and experienced defensive-minded head coach in Mike Vrabel, who's going to be having his guys ready to going in and poised going forward. So you have to see what's going on with that going forward. And even some guys I'm really looking and encouraged with. I know I made some points on it in my last video. I did an overview last week for the New York Giants training camp, but Richie James has been impressing the hell out of me. I think he's been taking advantage of the snaps that Sterling Shepard has been giving him since Shepard's been out rehabbing his Achilles injury. I think Richie James has been taking full advantage of that. Ditto for a guy like David Sills, who seems to be making a couple of plays going forward. Colin Johnson has been making some plays, as well as C.J. Board. So you love to see some of these depth wide receivers going out there and showing out. Saquon Barkley looks like he's back to 100% health, and he's looking like the Saquon Barkley of old, but at the same time, show it on the field. So, just my quick rundown on this whole thing. Everybody should be hyped. New regime, new optimism. We all should be excited as New York Giants fans. I will never discredit, and you guys can get on me and get on any other Giants content creators that are thinking, oh, you're just being negative, you're just being pessimistic, it's a new regime, anything could happen. If you want to be optimistic and you want to be 1,000% excited from what you hear and what you see, and it being a new regime, bringing that optimism, I will never fault you. Go out there, be optimistic, that's fine. But don't get on a guy if he wants to go out there and also be a little bit critical and be a little bit skeptical on the fact that it is training camp. We have not seen these guys strap on the pads for multiple practices, and these guys have not hit like we have seen in previous years when it comes to training camp. And we would like to see what this team could do when the games are being played, not just in preseason, but especially in the regular season, because that's what it comes down to it. You can have a lot of players that can look like superstars and look great when it comes to training camp and preseason, but when the lights shine bright, you just don't get the type of production that you get when it comes to preseason. We've seen a lot of guys perform well in preseason, but when the games matter in the regular season, they come up short. So if you want to be optimistic, that's fine. If you want to come off pessimistic, that's fine. That's what makes this New York Giants fan base what it is and why we love this fan base. Everybody has their differing opinions, but when it comes down to it, we all love the New York Giants fan base the same. So that's just a couple of my news and notes going forward. As some of these guys are starting to play a little bit better now, the pads have been strapped on the past couple of days. If you're going out to New York Giants Fan Fest this coming Friday, have an absolutely fantastic time. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be there, but I will be rooting on some of my fellow fellow Giants content creators and podcasters. Have a wonderful time over there. And hopefully these New York Giants players and the coaches are going to give you a show when it comes to the scrimmages going on for the New York Giants on Friday evening for this team going forward. And hopefully the Giants can stay healthy, and hopefully we're going to see some of these players continue to play pretty decent and see what this New York Giants team is going to bring us going forward. So that's just my little overview of the New York Giants so far. In a couple of practices in the second week of training camp, we're about a week away from the first preseason game against the New England Patriots on Thursday night next week in the evening. So we'll have to see what some of these guys can do in their first preseason action going forward. So if you like the video, please hit the like button below. Subscribe if you haven't already to NYG Jeffy 3285 for more breaking news updates and chatter surrounding the New York Giants, Brooklyn Nets, New York Mets, WWE Wrestling, as well as food for thought. I want to give a shout out to my fellow members of the Big Blue Crew, as well as Hardcore Sports Network, for all the work and all the hard work you guys have been doing in the community. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep working at it. And turn on the bell for the notifications for the next video or short that drop surrounding the New York Giants. And I want you guys to leave your comments in my video in the comment section below on what's your honest opinions so far and what you've seen in New York Giants training camp, whether it be optimistic, pessimistic, what you're looking forward to in the first preseason game, what players you're liking, what players you're liking what you hear from them so far, which players you're wishing would show more in training camp, and hopefully going into the first preseason game next week. Just give me your honest opinions on everything with the New York Giants so far this year. So I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. Take it easy. Training camp's going to continue to roll on. Fan Fest, like I mentioned earlier, happening Friday at about 6, 7 o'clock at night. Giants are going to be hosting a scrimmage that night, so we're going to have to see what these guys are going to put out there during that scrimmage. Everybody enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon, and always remember, let's go New York Football Giants, and Together Blue all the way.